excited to talk about hunting adversaries using TOR. So, Milind, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. I'll be talking today about hunting bad guys that use TOR in real time. And I've got quite a few examples to talk about, like what is TOR, what is the relation between TOR and IR, the lab setup that I built, the patterns, the MITRE framework, how it fits in, some real life examples, use cases, and then why is this crucial for IR, or why should you pay attention to this talk rather? So first, let's talk about me. I have about 12 years of experience total. My top skills will be threat intel, incident response, and a combination of 2S big data analytics. I've been working on TOR or researching on TOR for the past 12 years, and I've spoken at a few previous conferences as well, including DEF CON last year. And this has been a passion over time for me to just find out more information. If I find something as a black box, I have to know about it, how it works, what it is, what I can do with it. So let's start with TOR. So TOR stands for the onion router. Now this is a very well-known word, but most people don't really understand what does somebody mean by the onion router. Now if you focus at the image on the left side, to explain the onion router part better, I took an image of a sliced onion and I drew circles on top just to show what it's like. When you connect to something over TOR, you'll use something called a TOR browser. So you'll first go to an entry node. That's the first layer that you see outside in red. Then you'll come to a relay node, which is completely anonymized and has, every time you pass through every layer, there's a new level of security that's added on top. So after a relay node, you come to the exit node, and from the exit node, you go to the actual website. So at minimum, there's at least 3 layers of protection added, further anonymizing and encrypting traffic as you're going to the actual website that you're trying to connect to. Now, based on TOR project website, they operate some metrics on how many people actually use TOR on a daily basis. Lately, there have been more than 2 million users, and this number was a lot lower a little while ago, a few months earlier rather. And what I feel is this because a lot of people are now stuck at home, and thanks to COVID, they're all enjoying using TOR. Now, what is the main point that people use TOR, or what is it that they're trying to have? It's anonymity. There are a lot of countries in the world where freedom of speech is prohibited. You're not allowed to post whatever you want, or you're just trying to whistleblowing and so on. In those cases, perfect sense. It's a really helpful thing. But there's also bad uses of TOR. Like, for example, in 1st of July, the FBI and CSAT, based out of US, published an advisory talking about how threat actors are now using TOR infrastructure for anonymity and obfuscation to go and do malicious activities or attack other systems, servers, and so on. This is, I'll say, the bad use of TOR. What TOR was designed for, to protect anonymity of people trying to use it, trying to protect their freedom of expression and so on. This is not exactly the intended use for it. So how does this fit into IR? Now, typically, if you're working on an incident response, or if you have worked in incident response, and while going through all the log analysis and so on, if you see any traffic connecting to a TOR IP or coming from a TOR IP, typically the investigation will end there because now you're not sure on what to do next because TOR, it's anonymous and so on. So the top reasons that I found that IR investigation will end at a place like this would be malware and bad guys communicating through TOR. Now, recently, if you have seen a lot of malwares and so on, when they're beaconing out to their CNC system, they're going through TOR. So if you're typically looking at investigation, you see it's going to TOR, and then that's obvious kind of compromise, but still technically your investigation ended there. Now, at that point, you're wondering, how did this even happen? Why didn't the victim organization actually block connection to or from TOR for the C2 communication to go through and so on? And I work in incident response a lot. And in almost every incident I've been on, the clients, even if they had, say, a layer 7 firewall, very expensive, all the bells and whistles, they had threat intel feeds, they had everything money can buy. They forgot to tune it or turn the firewall security features on. They let all the traffic go through, they let all the traffic come in, especially for TOR traffic and so on. And hence, even if the client got compromised through any other means, if they had just disabled this, some form of communication on C2 or data exfiltration may not have happened. And data exfiltration with TOR, for me, came out to a few interesting things as well. In one client's case, actually noticed data being infiltrated, basically coming in from another client or whosoever that company was, through a TOR node onto our client's system, and then from our client taken somewhere else, again through Tor. So we saw big chunks of data, close to a few terabytes, coming into the client from Tor and then going out. And we still had traces of file left when we did the forensics. That's how we found out it's a different company. And it's just interesting how threat actors are hiding their tracks better by moving data through hacked organizations. Now, first about the incident background, to help you better understand what is it that I was trying to do. So we got hold of a client. They had ransomware issues going on. According to the client, they had some printers available for access, including the kind where you can send an email and print things and so on. So printers essentially directly connected, or if not through an app. They had web servers, websites, and DMZs, and the whole shebang. They also had default Apache pages. Now, in the client's case, they were developing some new technologies, tips, things, and so on. And they just decided to leave everything open when the incident happened, and they're not sure if the incident happened because of that. Obviously, the client had firewalls and had a lot of SCADA and IoT devices. So at this time, you're thinking easily any of these could be the one responsible. In our OSINT scanning, and every time we onboard a client as part of incident response, we perform scans using Shodan and so on, try and understand what part of the client infrastructure may be exposed, and say, based on Shodan's timestamp, when it was last exposed and things like that, so we can get some history out of it. We found they had a lot of unpatched web servers, some going back at least 7 years. So definitely they don't have a good patch management system. We found systems running Windows 2003 that the client forgot about. Apparently they were supposed to be decommissioned a few years earlier, and then the client forgot about it and everybody else forgot about it, but it was still connected to the network and so on. And then we found FTP servers without authentication. What that means is you could connect to the client's FTP system using the username anonymous and a blank password, and it just let you connect. You had full read and write access, as in you can take anything you want and even put anything you want. So at this point, any of these could be a reason for the hack. What we found was something a little different. We also found a lot of Linux embedded systems. And of all the Linux embedded systems, I'll say the most popular one that we have seen is something called busybox. It's like the Swiss Army knife of Linux embedded systems. It has a lot of functionality, a lot of tools built in. It just makes life easier. So we found was the attacker was able to compromise one of the Linux embedded system, connect to it because it was accepting connections over telnet, obviously, and then able to get the credentials that were stored on that device, which coincidentally happened to be the same credentials used for local admin across the network, because somebody thought it would be easier to remember passwords that way, and then compromise by lateral movement through the entire environment. All of these connections, based on the firewall logs, which fortunately was logging everything, came from Tor IPs. So we did a search, just out of curiosity, on Shodan, how many busybox devices are there? So we just put the word busybox in double quotes and searched, and we identified over 2,000 busybox devices directly connected to the internet. And most of them, if you do a search yourself as well, you'll find they're quite easily vulnerable. Now, while going through all of the traffic logs, you're trying to identify what is the first connection that happened, or when the first connection happened, followed by trying to identify what is the most common pattern, or what is the script, or what was the attack method that was used to attack the actual client. So that one, I found 3 commands, or 3 set of commands that were repeating every time. There were 2 scripts, lrs dbins.sh and 8usa.sh, hosted on multiple IP addresses, but all having the same name, and or rather these 2 names, and each job was basically to download a particular script, shell script, onto the box, give it execution privileges, and then execute it. And after these 2 will run, there will be a telnet section that will be established right after that. And this went on repeating. So I took all of the traffic that was going specifically matching this pattern of /bin/busybox, and I checked the IPs against known relay nodes, active nodes, and so on, just to find out how many of them are Tor rated connections. And as you can see in the graph, this was actually a rising number. So we believe at one point of time, the client was compromised, and then over time, it just went on increasing with a definite compromise and potentially other activities happening, because all of this was automated. Now, at this point, I decided I need to get more information about this. So I built a lab, and my motivation was to first identify how the client was related to Tor, like more about how this works with TOR and so on. How's a TOR connection established? I have a rough idea of when, but how? And then identifying the true patient zero. Now, generally, when you're seeing ransomware, your first thought is, where is the spear phishing email? Where is that link? Where's the attachment that may have come through email or through a web link and so on? You're generally not thinking on how that initial file got there. In this client's case, the Linux emitter system was compromised. Using that, the attackers were able to move around laterally and then place a few links and malicious files on one of the accounting servers. And then some folks in the accounting clicked on that link and so on happened. So the first assumed patient zero at that point was the accounting machine. No one really thought about a true patient zero is when the first breach or the first infection or the first hack happened. And then in the end, complete the IR investigation. Now, my challenges. So I set up a TOR exit node. It's been running for a while. I set up a custom Honeypot script to capture all the STTP-based attacks. So I took Glassstop. It's quite a popular honeypot for STTP-based attacks. So I used that, learned on how I can make it better suitable specifically for the attacks I'm trying to capture. And then I had a big issue. TOR by default doesn't log traffic, which is actually a good thing because if you're logging traffic, it beats the point of the security and anonymity. When trying to log all the traffic or running the TOR node, I had one issue that was a really big and annoying one. A lot of people torrent over TOR. What it does is, one, exposes still the actual IP, so there's no real benefit in doing torrent over TOR. Second, the service providers from whom I've taken the system on rent for running the exit node and so on will shut me down because I'm breaking the SLA of torrenting over the infrastructure, which is not what they wanted. As a result, I had a lot of inconsistent data because every time the system goes down, needs to be rebuilt. It takes time for the node to come operational and so on. And in general, hammered by attacks from TOR and the internet. Now, if you're wondering, what's the point of Honeypot in this case? A honeypot in this case, the best way to explain this is, if you're just running a honeypot, you will capture all the attacks coming to you. If you put a honeypot on a TOR node, you see the attacks coming to you and to everybody else who's being routed through that TOR node for that duration and so on. Now, I try to find more information on what else I can find within the honeypot logs for the same pattern that I had with the client. So I went through my logs and I found there's a lot of exact pattern that is being repeated. In this case, 3 or 4 different kind of shell scripts based on the file name, different IPs that are hosting it, and I identified 21 unique IPs that are hosting the malicious scripts. So it's entirely possible that all of this was part of an attack campaign or a malware campaign. There were 53 TOR IPs pushing the scripts. That doesn't mean it's 53 different users. It could be 53 different instances of a TOR circuit or TOR connections, or could be somebody's connected to one exit node now. For security, that's just the exit node. So I'm seeing a different IP address or the relay is coming through and so on. But in the list of the last 30 days of time when I ran this, there were 4,036 unique targets. Now, how do I know they were targets? Since I was running the exit node, I was able to see all the traffic that goes out to the end part. And since all of these traffics were HTTP, it was already unencrypted. There's no talk about decryption of anything. So I could easily see who's being targeted and how bad, or roughly what scripts are being applied in each place and so on. Now I took this information and I tried to learn what else I can get from all of the honeypot logs that are going on. So I could see all the different kinds of attacks. So what I did was I took a lot of Yara rules, Sigma rules, Snort, Suricata, and even made some of my own Sigma rules and Yara rules to further classify on the kind of attacks or the data that I'm seeing pass through, so I can have a better understanding of what are threat actors doing or different threat actors that are doing this. Now, I took the last 30 days and last 365 days just to have a comparison to see what are the trends or what are the different activities. And those are very interesting finding. Over the last 30 days, 70.5% of the attacks were SQL injection. Over the last 365 days, 74.5% were also SQL injection. Pretty much the same consistent activity over the past 1 year. And if you notice, the rest of the ones as well, remote code execution, cross-site scripting, web scan, and so on, were the exact same size, or say the ranking in the pie chart or the donut chart. If it's SQL injection is first here, it's first in the second one. If it's remote code execution first in last 365 days, same for cross-site scripting. So just as a basic, say if I want to give out a prize for the most favored attack type in the last 1 year, it would be SQL injection. Why specifically this more than others? I'm not entirely sure. I've just seen a bigger activity on this one. And even on this, I was trying to identify what are the different injection attacks. So I saw a lot of attacks going on, but most of them turned out to be injection based. So I did a special search just to understand what are the different kind of attacks I'm seeing and what patterns they're following and so on. The most common web scan activity or the attack string I could find was this, which looks like it was something somebody made for a test. The second one as well for PHP injection was again a test string. This is something very used as a very popular tool. The third one for SQL injection didn't really stand out either, even though this is the most common one for searching for anything from information underscore schema.schema. And this is like a standard SQL injection that you can find anywhere else in any tutorials or automated tools and so on. So in this, I tried to put all the data together on what is these net injection attacks I'm seeing. In the last 30 days, I found more than 900,000 SQL injection attacks alone, followed by cross-site scripting, PHP injection, and so on. This made me feel that at one point of time, whoever is using the SQL injection attacks is using an automated tool. This is definitely cannot be targeted manually because who has the time to sit through 900,000 attacks? Or if somebody does, I'm not aware of that. So I tried to make a live dashboard of all the attacks as they're coming in. So the panel that you see on the left side, this is a live dashboard that I made that filters in all the attack payloads as they're coming in, along with a count of how many times the exact same string was used in the last 24 hours. So the first one was used 81 times, the second one 75 times, and so on. So the benefit of this is, if the same string is used across multiple websites, you can say to a certain degree of assurance that all of those websites, the actual targeted ones, are part of the same campaign, are part of a list that the attacker is using to go out and attack. And then same for the remote code execution, the filtered ones, specifically what, say, vendor or what device and so on people are going after. So last 24 hours, this command to find memory info was run 337 times. Same for SQL injection. I was trying to find out if the point is true that multiple injections or multiple attack strings were used against a list of targets. There's also a very good chance that a lot of attack strings actually came through something that could look like a checklist or a cheat sheet. So I took all the PHP injection attacks and focused at only the truly unique ones, or something that is unique and can also go under something like a cheat sheet or something like a checklist. So in the PHP injections, these that you notice, the 5, are only differing in numbers and maybe one character here and there. Otherwise, they're exactly the same. The cross-site scripting actually looks like it came out of a cheat sheet. If you try the first one, it doesn't work, make a minor change, try the second one, try the third one, try the fourth one, and so on. If you Google cross-site scripting attack cheat sheets or SQL injection cheat sheets, you'll find all of these there. Same for the SQL injection ones. All of these are part of different tools that can be used for automating attacks. So no one that is directly specific and so on. So I took all of the attacks that looked like they came from automated ones and tried to find how many were specific attacks or someone trying to be manual or not use an automated tool. Oh my God. So in the last month, about 85.88% of the attacks were automated scanning tools. All of them are quite popular and mostly free or pirated versions are available. And then 14.12, I found that were actual exploits. That is someone actually going after and targeting actual companies and so on. So I tried to pick 2 examples where this actually stood out in a big difference. The first one was a payload string that I identified as post action equal to login, key path equal to uname, $IFS, and so on. And I tried to find which exploit or which targeted attack will this point to. And the reason for that is I found 226 versions of this with the total attacks between April to July 2020 numbering 2.8 million. And if you see as compared to any other days, that's a massive spike. Now, even within this, every time I try to find out any information of an exploit and so on, my preferred place to go to is exploit DB. And the reason for that is even if the exploits have not been verified and so on, a lot of exploit writers will actually post their exploits there, wait for someone to validate, verify it, and so on. But you'll find a very good source or a good repository of all the exploits that are there in public for whatever vulnerability that exists. Now, DFIR is a router, firewall, and so on manufacturer, and they have a pre-auth remote root RCE. Now, just to note, the patch for this was released in March. The exploit came out in March 30th, and somebody on the dates of June 9, 10, 11, 12, each bar is a day, decided to paint the town red with attacking numerous endpoints or numerous systems with remote code executions. Then the attack died out again, then a small spike, and then again on June 23rd and 24th. So based on things like this, in different, say, threat intel providers and so on, you'll notice in their blogs that they talk about how they're seeing trends of attackers. That's this exploit, say for Mirai botnet, somebody's testing the botnet, such and such activity has happened and so on. And you're often wondering, how do people know that information? Well, the easier way is that these attacks are happening against your client's infrastructure, and then you're taking the logs from the client and you're able to pick these things out and so on. But by running a honeypot, I can actually see without having to do all of that hard work. That is, I don't have to depend on my client getting attacked for me to know of a trend of a new malware or new remote code execution that is going around. It really helps explain and understand what are the new trends, what are the new things that are going on. I found another one, and the point was that the previous one spiked. It was big, massive spike. So somebody gave me advice that I should also focus on the ones that are very low in comparison. So most of the exploits or the attacks I saw were 500,000 and higher. Then there was some that were quite low. So like this one, 947 times. Now the interesting for this one is this exploit came out in 2018. It is patched, but still people are testing different exploits to see if they can get hold of somebody's device and then maybe wreak havoc, use it as part of botnet or whatever else they've got in mind for it. So based on all of these attacks, I was able to map everything back to MITRE's attack framework. Within the initial access, I'm seeing a lot of exploit public-facing applications. That's where all the SQL injections so on come in. Under execution, I have a lot of scripting, all the busybox examples. In persistence, once you have access to external remote services, even busybox for that matter. Discovery, now there's a lot of web scanning going on. So even if you're running an Nmap scan through TOR to any of those websites and so on, whether done by you or by an actual threat actor, if I happen to be the lucky guy through whose exit node this goes, then I can see that activity and plot you in my nice map. Lots of command and control traffic. So basically C2 traffic going beaconing out and so on. And then exfiltration through the same C2 channels, C2 IPs and so forth. So I decided I'll take all of these different categories and then map all of the honeypot activity along with the 90-day time period to show what are the trends that I've noticed. Now, in terms of discovery, about 770,000 events. I'll say the graph goes up and down. There have been a few spikes here and there, but not much for substantial. In terms of execution, that's the remote code execution part. And the two spikes are pretty much the DFIR one that we spoke about. The initial access, still going up and down. There are a few spikes here and there, probably on weekends when people are free and they just want to go out and attack other sites and so on. But the most interesting one was command and control traffic, which has actually been increasing at a steady state. And all through the COVID lockdown period, this has actually been going up. So I can definitely say that threat actors have been very busy with ransomwares and other related activities. Now, why is this crucial for IR? Now, if you've ever worked on any beaconing for malware as it leaves your environment or as you're receiving the beaconing information, there's one thing that I've noticed in all of my traffic analysis, the receive bytes. If it's 60, 62, or 66, this is the byte size. If the keep alive command is coming from the C2 server or the information or the requests and commands are coming in on what to do next. This size doesn't actually change across multiple instances that I've worked on. So after taking all of the data from Honeypot, I actually went back with a bunch of reports and other logs that I've analyzed to try and understand if there's something similar that I have, something that can match these. And then this is an example from a client where there was outbound beaconing activity to malicious IPs, so the firewall's not blocking anything, we could actually see connection to known C2 IPs, where the sent bytes was much larger than the received bytes, and overall there was about a terabyte of data that was uploaded from the client environment, which the client didn't know about because the firewall was not actually blocking all of this traffic. And we could see all the beaconing information, when it started, when it stopped. And interesting point of it stop, the moment the beaconing activity stops is when ransomware has happened. In most cases, ransomware is actually encrypting the malware that is beaconing out and so on. So if the beacon activity stops, you can know roughly when malware took effect on that particular, or sorry, ransomware took effect on that particular device. Okay. So I tried to find out how many attacks that we have seen in terms of attack traffic versus all the non-attacks. So I've got my own set of rules, filters, and so on to identify which of these were attack traffic and which of these were not attack traffic. So over the last 30 days, about 37.55% of the traffic, the one in orange, is the non-attack traffic, but about 62.45 was the attack traffic. And this was the same trend across the past year as well, which perfectly matches the attack donut that I made earlier about all the different kind of attacks that are coming through, that most of the traffic has been attack-based and less non-attack. But over the past 900 days, which is roughly the extent I've been running this little experiment, about 50.83% of the attack has been non-attack. But 50.83% of the traffic has been non-attack traffic, which means that at one point of time, there's something like a balance of what most people just using TOR for the reason it is to be used and so on, and not really using it for attack. So in conclusion, why is this crucial for IR? So the truth of the matter is there's so much evidence and the IOCs that are available from TOR if you know where to look. By building a honeypot, an incident responder can be proactive in acquiring this data and stopping attacks before they even occur. Like from learning all the different things I got from trending, from the analysis in the honeypot, from all the patterns, signatures, and so on identified, I can actually use that information now as part of the defensive means as well to proactively say work with a SOC team or general when you're doing threat hunting. Now you have a list of all the different commands or the new malware or the new exploits that are used and actively tested in the wild. And once you have a general idea, you know what's coming next in terms of attacks. Like even the cybercrime framework by Lockheed Martin, it shows first there is web scanning and then exploitation, delivery, and so on. You can see the exact same thing even in all the traffic logs on the honeypot. First, there's a lot of scanning with Nmap or other tools. Then there's actual attacks that are happening. And then you see potential data exfiltration or remote code executions and things like that. Now, if you add this to the possibility of enhancement or even qualifying the better threat hunting activities that you can have, this will be a must-have for any incident responder. You can definitely improve or rather reduce the amount of time it takes for you to find what is the next threat and so on that is going on. So another key point that is important to remember from the talk is, it is actually possible to follow the breadcrumbs during an incident from beyond TOR to understand how far the attack is coming from or where it's going and so on. And while this talk offers a good understanding of TOR and its implications, if you push the labs and test further, you can realize that you have a really good opportunity with some good setup and hopefully your TOR connection is not going down to identify what is exactly happening on a TOR node in terms of malicious activities.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. And I think it's always interesting to see how some of these technologies can be used for dual use. And I was very interested to see that as you extended the horizon to those 900 days, the way you described it, it hitting kind of this balance of legitimate versus illegitimate traffic was pretty fascinating.